If you direct your attention towards the title of this video, you'll see that it's called Skyrim But Good, which is a stupid title because I already think Skyrim is good, so then why would I title it that? Because I'm a stupid person. Anyway, when I was in like 6th grade, my brother sold me the idea of pitching in some money to buy Skyrim by saying it was like Dragon's Dogma, but you can play as a giant lizard person, which had me sold. I didn't actually end up pitching in, he paid for the entire game, but I ended up playing it more than him. Whatever. Anyway, Skyrim is like one of my favorite games ever. If you look on YouTube for reviews of Skyrim, you'll find what feels like hundreds of like 10-hour long videos shitting on Skyrim, completely dismantling every aspect of the game and calling its creators talentless hacks. Whenever I watch one of those videos, I find myself agreeing with almost everything said in them, but like yeah, the combat is ass, the storyline does suck, the characters are shallow, it looks bad, but like come on, it's Skyrim. Back in the day, people would sell Skyrim to you by saying it's a game where you can go anywhere and do anything. And if you've played Skyrim, you know that shit's not true. You kinda can't do anything in Skyrim. Almost every questline only has one ending, your dialogue choices don't matter, the way you build your character doesn't matter, almost every important NPC can't be killed, and so on. But it also is kinda true, in the sense that if you want to, you can walk your bitch ass across the entire map from the second you get to the open world, punch a beggar, rob a nobleman's house, get arrested and go to jail for a week, and then get out and do it all over again. You can go into a cave full of bandits and kill all of them except one to send a message, you can slaughter every guard in town, steal a family heirloom that you just returned to its owner, and so on. Now of course none of that actually matters, but you can still do it. Anyway, I'm going to be talking a lot about Skyrim in this video because the actual point of this video is to review Tainted Grail: Fall of Avalon, which is a game that a lot of people like to classify as a Scrolls-like, meaning that it's like Skyrim. And the funny thing about that is, Tainted Grail is bad in almost all of the exact same ways Skyrim is bad, except for one. And it is so insanely good in that one area that it completely makes up for the rest. It's not even like a you have to give it time type of thing, like within the first 30 minutes of playing the game you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway. So the biggest question I had going in was, who put their taint in my grail? I initially thought this game was adapted from a tabletop RPG, which is not false, there is a Tainted Grail tabletop. However, that one was adapted from a board game. I will freely admit that I'm not up to date with the board game community, but I didn't know they were making board games that went this hard. Anyway, I'm just going to start with that really good aspect I mentioned earlier because it's hard to keep it a secret when you have eyes. Spoilers ahead for this game for the rest of the video. The visuals in this game are amazing, like genuinely the visual designs of the monsters and areas in this game are maybe some of my favorite in any video game I've ever played. I had wanted to check out this game for a while because I heard it was like Skyrim, but going in, I didn't really know what it was about beyond King Arthur. Tainted Grail begins with you in a prison, just like every Elder Scrolls game, so it was pretty typical at the start. You then make your character
dwell on this for a while.
Choose your starting attributes, escape your cell with the help of a mysterious figure, you know, the usual. However, like 20 minutes into the intro, you get teleported into this chamber, and immediately it's like, what the fuck? It was this exact moment, 20 minutes into the game, where I locked in and knew I was going to finish this one. I'll talk more about the visual direction later because I want to save my gushing for later. For now, let's talk about the general gameplay. So if you've ever played a Bethesda game, you should feel right at home here, with the exception of this game's third-person mode being super trash, like look at these animations. When it comes to stats and levels, this game is kind of a mix of a bunch of different systems. It does have the Skyrim method where using certain weapons or abilities makes you more proficient with them, but then it also has the Dark Souls aspect of like, you know, strength, dexterity, endurance, spirituality, and certain weapons and armor requiring you to have a certain level on those skills. And then it also has the more modern RPG approach where you can put points into skill trees for each area to unlock new buffs or ways to use your abilities. I think that last one and the Dark Souls one are probably the best integrated. The usage-based upgrading kind of never comes into it. Now besides combat, there are other skills like sneaking and lockpicking, however what there's not is a speechcraft skill because there are no real speech checks in this game. That'll tie into a bigger point later, just keep it in mind for now. So in terms of build variety, it's pretty similar to a game like Skyrim. You can fight with melee weapons, ranged, or magic. And when it comes to melee, I would say it's much better than that game from 2011. Mainly because they give you a dodge with iframes, not very many iframes, but you can upgrade that later. It's such a simple thing that we take for granted today because of how popular Souls-likes are, but just having a dodge makes this kind of combat system way more enjoyable. I didn't really play with bows that much, but my impression of them is that you're meant to kind of do a stealth archer-like build with them. The draw time on the stronger bows is so long that you barely have any time to get a shot off if an enemy is approaching you. It's pretty realistic in that way, even if it basically made me never use bows. When it comes to melee, you can use one-handed weapons, either one and nothing, one and a shield, or two of them, all of which have their own skill trees. Except for just using one sword, but even that does have a skill associated with it that makes parrying easier. Parrying in this game is like any other parry. You have to block at exactly the right time to knock an enemy off balance and get an opening to attack. You have your usual suspects in the one-handed category: swords, maces, daggers, axes, and it's kind of the same with two-handed, except there's also spears, which is cool. I first started out with a dual wield build, but got really bored and switched to two-handed later on, where I ended up with this like vampire build where each hit I did stole life from enemies. It was pretty fun, but it got old after a while, mainly due to the fact that almost every weapon in the game has a very similar moveset. One of the big things about a game like Dark Souls or Elden Ring that makes the combat fun is that when I decide to switch weapons, I now have to learn a new moveset with new timings, new damage, and all that. Mostly. However, in this game, when I switch from using like a war axe to a greatsword, while there is a visual difference in some animations and like a reach difference, the timings are the exact same. Enemies don't help this either, with many of them having very simple movesets. Magic also kinda sucks in this game. There's really only two fields of magic, destruction and summoning, and even then you're highly encouraged to use both at the same time. My second playthrough was a summoner build and it was pretty fun at times, but in general the summons kinda suck. Even in Skyrim, which also has a pretty bad magic system, you had spells to make yourself invisible, make enemies passive, make them fight each other, and so on. In this game you can throw lightning bolts, fireballs, daggers, waves of fire, which is all cool, but just like the melee weapons, in effect it's all the same attacks, just different damage and animations. So I've been in my weeb era lately, and I started watching Jujutsu Kaisen, which made me want to play a summoner build.
Moraga! Help! Help! Help me! Help me!
At times this was a lot of fun, but the big problem with summons in this game is that the best of the summons are lame as fuck. There are some really cool monsters in this game, so why is it that the only ones you get to summon are the little goblin ones? Act 1 you get the Corpse Eaters and Grindylows, Act 2 you get Redcaps, and Act 3 you get Remoras, which are all basically little goblin guys. There are some exceptions, like you can summon wolves in Act 1 or crystal crawlers in Act 2, but like why can't I summon a Mistwalker or something? The worst part of this is that after Act 1, the monster summons are completely outclassed by the human summons. Yeah, you can literally summon dudes to help you out. It's actually kinda goofy when you can just make like 5 dudes with spears appear. Anyway, no shade to the spearmen, but it kinda sucks when I wanted to be a monster summoner, but if I actually want to kill my enemies, I have to summon spearmen, assassins, or undead knights. Also, I have major beef with the undead knights in particular, because there's this lich enemy who can summon these massive undead knights, but the only ones we get to summon are the lame ones. To be fair, the Remoras in Act 3 are one of the best summons in the game, besides, and big spoiler alert here, when you get to summon the undead knights of the Round Table. Now, to be fair, that is really sick, but when there's shit like flesh trees and weird alien looking fae in this game, I personally would like to summon them instead. One big thing this game does allow you to do though is command your summons, which means that you don't just have to get jumped while your summons focus on one enemy. You can command them to help you. I also think it's unique how summons in this game subtract from your total mana while out, but in turn give you faster mana regeneration. Now of course there is some build variety in how you decide to spec out your character. Like with a melee build you can focus heavy on health and lifesteal like I did and make yourself a tank, or focus heavy on dodging and applying status effects like bleed or poison. Likewise with magic you can try to do a warrior mage or something and still be able to wear armor, or unlock the Red Death skill tree which has a perk that caps enemy damage to 1/4 of your health bar, meaning you can run around naked if you want and still take at least 4 hits from any given enemy. There's actually no passive healing in this game. The only way you can heal is either by drinking a potion, eating, or sleeping in a bed, or for some reason, not resting next to a bonfire. Unlike Skyrim though, where if you're getting diffed in a fight you can pop the menu open and eat 46 cheese wheels, in this game you have to assign the healing items to a slot and then eat them on the fly. Some of the weapons and armor look really cool though, like my first character ended up using this ogre blade that was like taller than him, and my second... I swear bro, I was wearing the Gunnar armor because of the stat buffs. Please bro, I swear, please. Speaking of enemies, most of them look really cool, like peak character designs, and unlike the player, a lot of them get to use unique attacks. Most human enemies just have either a melee weapon or a bow, but the rare boss here and there will be able to throw sword slashes, slam the ground, or whatever. The hitboxes are pretty janky and it never really feels that good, but it does add some flavor to the game so I can't hate on it too much. The monster enemies are where the fun is really at though. Probably my favorite enemy in the game were weird stumps because they blend in so well with the environment. One of my other favorite enemies is the Giant, purely because the devs knew damn well these things would clip through the walls and still put them in. It's also just fun to fight something this large in a game like this, even if it's nowhere near as well designed and large enemies in almost any other game. Alright, now before I get into the bad of this game, let's talk about the visuals I've been hyping up so much. So when it comes to fantasy horror, especially in video games, I think you see a lot of influence from H.P. Lovecraft, who you see a lot of influence in every genre of horror. Even to the point now where I feel like people are kind of turned off by the phrase Lovecraftian, which is more because of bad adaptations than anything, but whatever. Whose work you don't see often inspiring fantasy is H.R. Geiger. Sci-fi, yes, but fantasy? Stepping into that chamber 30 minutes into the game and seeing this insane biomechanical altar in what I thought would be a pretty typical fantasy adventure was such a pleasant surprise for me, and I can't say for sure that this aspect of it wasn't in the board game, but I'm still going to praise the devs for this. Shit is so sick. It's also not overused. You only ever see the Geiger-esque shit in very specific sections, while the rest of it is pure dark fantasy, which makes it never really lose its allure. One of my favorite things they do is have some giant unexplainable monster just existing in the distance. You can't interact with them and they have no role in the overall game except to make you wonder, what the fuck is that? Likewise in the overworld you'll very often find massive fossils, weird faces carved into the rock, a giant elephant stuck in the rock, like what the hell is even happening here? The answer is that there is no answer. Humans are not native to the continent this game takes place on, Avalon, so no one knows what any of this is. This is kinda weird, but the aesthetic of this game reminds me heavily of the old iOS game, Infinity Blade, which if you've never played it, sorry bro, it's gone forever now. But it was this really great like sword fighting game that had some insane enemy designs. This fat thing has always stuck in my head as one of my favorites, but the knights from that game look a lot like what King Arthur does and the Four Dweller knights do in this game. Oh, Infinity Blade. Alright, the last part of this game I have good things to say about is the story, and only half of that is actually good. I'll talk more in depth about the story later on, but to give you a general idea, your body becomes a vessel for the soul of King Arthur, who wants to be reincarnated so that he can save his kingdom from the sorry state you find it in. To do that, you need to recover 3 artifacts, his sword, shield, and crown, all of which contain parts of his soul. Along the way, you experience plenty of side stories, as well as region-specific main quests. The good part of this game's story is King Arthur. He's genuinely a very compelling character, and as you go through more of the game and have more conversations with him, learning more about his actions while alive, the two of you bond like crazy. It's not like he's constantly commenting on what you do and see. He almost never chimes in or tells you what decision to make or judges you for the ones that you do make, despite the fact that your character constantly does that to him. At the start of the game, Arthur is like, "Come my friend, let me show you the glorious kingdom that I built."
In time, I'll remember more. But that's enough questions for now. Let us walk together and see the kingdom forged so long ago.
But by the end, he's basically given up on it all.
Do what you want. There's nothing about this land that I recognize anymore. All I've ever done got turned into dust, corrupted against my intentions, destroyed. Why bother?
To give you a brief rundown of this bloke's backstory, he and all humans fled their homeland because it was ravaged by a disease called the Red Death. They arrived on Avalon, which was inhabited by the Four Dwellers, a strange species of immortal giants who built all the biomechanical architecture you see in this game. Arthur and his knights eventually won the war, and he divided up Avalon among his most loyal followers, eventually dying of old age as people tend to do. Content with the fact that he had now created a beautiful, peaceful, long-lasting kingdom that would only continue to grow stronger after his death. Avalon in the present day, or at least the parts of it that we see, is such a shitty place. The roads are infested with bandits and monsters, the only civilizations you find are barely surviving clusters of like 50 people, and every night a magical fog called the Weirdness, with a Y, descends on the land, turning everyone caught outside of safe areas into mindless zombies. Entire villages have been wiped out due to the returned Red Death, which coincidentally also turns people into mindless zombies. And the only answer Avalon's leadership has is to send people off to an asylum offshore to research them, which is where the player ends up at the start of the game. You also meet people along the way, like the captain of the Horns of the South, the Lord of Kuinoct, and the leaders of the Dalriada tribes, almost all of which are in some way trying to rebel against the leadership of Avalon, Camelot. You also meet Camelot's leadership, and they're no better. Galahad is a maniac who burns his enemies at the stake. Denholm is trying to get people to leave their entire lives behind in Kuinoct, and the Dalriada have been betrayed at basically every turn. Arthur sees the state his once great kingdom was in, and the people who now run it, and realizes that everything he did in life amounted to nothing. He goes from pushing you into gathering his artifacts so that he can restore his kingdom, to accepting that there never really was anything to restore. It's an amazing character arc that genuinely has you feeling bad for this guy who's a self-acknowledged war criminal. If only this great character arc actually amounted to anything in the end. Hold that thought because let's talk about the various B-plots in this game. So first of all, Tainted Grail does kind of have speech checks, but never for anything important. I think the most important one is where you find a redcap who stole a wizard's hat and gained intelligence, and if you can pass enough skill checks in his dialogue, you can get him to let you into his lair, then help teach him English. But as for the main quests, none of that shit matters. It's actually a lot like Skyrim in that regard. I mentioned this earlier, but you really might as well not have any choices in Skyrim, because they really don't matter. Despite being one of the most popular RPG games ever, it's kinda not that type of game. Tainted Grail is a similar story, except it kind of tries to be that kind of game and fails. So there are plenty of choices that you're faced with in Tainted Grail. Who will you side with here? Will you kill this guy or talk to him?
Do I run over this liberal, or do I drive around him? What do you think?
Should you give this magical kingdom outside of time and space to a mushroom hive mind, or nah? The problem is, and to be fair, this is actually a really common problem with so-called choice matters RPG games, is that your choices only impact what happens in the moment and the ending of the game, and nothing in between. So in the first area, for example, Horns of the South, this Dalriada, which are like Scottish people I think, named One Eye and the captain of the Horns conspire together to declare independence from Camelot and become their own kingdom. Back in his day, Arthur said the Horns of the South would be on equal standing with the Knights of the Round Table, and yet in the time sense, Camelot has completely walked over the Horns in almost every regard. Your goal here is to pull Excalibur out of stone, and apparently only the captain knows how to do that, and he'll only tell you if you kill Galahad for him, a Knight of the Round Table who's just arrived to put down the rebellion. You have two options here, side with One Eye and the captain and 1v1 Galahad, which is actually super tough, or tell Galahad about the plot, then meeting up with him to kill the captain and One Eye, where you have to fight like 10 berserkers at once. This is actually a pretty impactful decision, like the politics of the entire kingdom will change depending on who you help here. Here's the thing though, if you kill Galahad and help One Eye, Denholm, the general of one of Camelot's armies in Act 2, apparently hasn't heard the news and still asks you to help him out. Likewise, if you do the opposite and kill One Eye, the Dalriada in Act 3, who are currently trying to gather an army to go help One Eye march on Camelot, also haven't heard the news and still ask you to help them gather the tribes together. Quick mention though, you don't actually need either the captain or Galahad to help you get Excalibur. You can do it yourself if you manage to outlast the damage that it deals to you. All that doing their quest does is have you meet this giant who will brand you worthy, which makes you take less damage from it. Act 2 has this even worse because you can either help the Lord of Kuinoct turn back on the Menhir, the statue that's supposed to keep the weirdness away, or you can help Denholm, who wants to move the Menhir to Camelot, where they have more of them, also moving the people there so they can all be safe together. Seems like another cool dilemma, right? Well actually, no matter who you help, Lord Yvain still decides to go on a quest for the Holy Grail, which by law prevents Camelot from moving the Menhir, so that was a little pointless. Yvain will also give you the shield with Arthur's soul in it regardless of whether you helped him or Denholm, and regardless of whether you helped him gather allies for his quest or let him do it alone. Act 3 is kind of unique in the sense that as soon as you arrive, the leader of one of the tribes is like, yeah, the crown is in that dungeon, you can go get it if you want, but Arthur always said he wouldn't do it without our permission. And indeed, you can just go grab the crown. All you get if you help the various Dalriada tribes is King Arthur's armor, which of course looks really sick and might be worth the trouble just for that, but I do like how open they are with the fact that you don't need to help these losers if you don't want to. The armor does help you with the dungeon, but it honestly didn't help me because I had to respec to a goofy-ass quality build in order to use it, so it ended up making me worse off in the end. Now you do get a Fallout New Vegas style slideshow at the end of the game that shows you what happened to everybody because of the decisions that you made. And sure, that's better than nothing, but I would have liked to see what impact my actions had on the world in real time, rather than what happens after I can no longer play the game. Also, those damn slideshows aren't at all affected by the ending you choose, they're like, completely disconnected. We'll get into it later. The big problem with the slideshows for me is that I just did not give a fuck what happened to any of these characters. I swear there's like 2 compelling characters in this game. King Arthur and this hot geographer lady. Everyone else is just so boring. For example, the only love interest in the game, that I found, is this blacksmith guy called Beor who got his heart stole by a fae. Which is a little crazy given how fae look in this game. But you first recover his heart only to find that it's not working right, so you find this other blacksmith who can forge him a new one. The new one has to be fueled though, so you can either kill like 10 monsters, or give 40 of your own max HP into it. If you do the monster one, that's where the story ends. However, if you give Beor the heart with your life inside of it, he falls in love with you. We love a bisexual king around here. However, Beor immediately gave me the ick because after you give him the heart, he starts sending you on little fetch quests to get things like wood, stone, and a jewel so you can build a hammer for a special someone. Of course, that special someone ends up being you, and that's when he confesses his love to you, but like, bro, how are you going to have me running around, diving into these super dangerous areas to get materials for my own gift? Especially because on the playthrough where I did this, I was playing a mage. Clearly this motherfucker doesn't know anything about me and he got me a gift he would like making, not one that I would like. Also, I think he's kinda ugly, but anyway, I felt no attraction at all to this man. I only did the romance thing because I wanted to get footage of it happening. And let me tell you, buddy, it's not that I don't feel attraction to video game men. Whenever I play Mass Effect, I exclusively play as female Shepard so I can hook up with Garrus. It's just that Beor in particular sucks. Like, if you could fuck King Arthur, I'd be bouncing on it at the soonest opportunity. Anyway, Beor was only memorable because he's the only romance option that I found. Apparently there's also a female one you can find, but I never did. There's one character I think suffers the most from this, although I think this one might also be intentional. The guy who breaks you out of prison at the start is one of King Arthur's original Knights of the Round Table, Caradoc, and his entire goal in this game is to kill King Arthur for good. Anyway, the thing about Caradoc is that he is a huge asshole, but not in like a I love to hate him type of way. Like, he's just an uncaring asshole. All he wants to do is kill King Arthur. He barely even talks to you unless he's telling you where to find the next artifact, so that you can then gather the parts of Arthur's soul and Caradoc and kill him. The result of this is that Arthur is 50 times more likable than Caradoc is, even though Caradoc has very valid reasons to hate Arthur. You come to find out through Caradoc that King Arthur has been resurrected multiple times already, and each time the weirdness that's destroying human civilization gets worse, as well as Arthur himself becoming more and more cruel each time. We don't really know when these resurrections happen, so it's kind of hard to tell what Caradoc is talking about when he says that. Like, for example, one of the bad things Arthur did was enslave the giants and force them into an endless sleep. However, giant children can't sleep, so he ended up leaving all their children to fend for themselves while their parents were in a coma. Arthur's crown allows him to control giants somehow, so when he put the giants to sleep, he made them all go into the Forlorn Swords, the home of the Dalriada, as basically a warning to them that if they ever acted up, he could awaken the giants to destroy them, even though the Dalriada had been some of his greatest fighters in the war against the Fordwellers. There's some other things he did, and honestly does during the game, that make you say, huh, maybe Caradoc's right. However, Caradoc is just so unlikable that it's hard to really believe a word he says. The way they balance this out in the end is kinda cheap. Right at the end, before you're going to get faced by the choice of killing or resurrecting Arthur, you meet this guy named Orion, who you only heard about earlier. He's actually the guy behind the Red Priests, the order of monks who sent you to the asylum to be experimented on, which resulted in you being able to hold King Arthur's soul. This is really cheap because 1, he looks creepy, and 2, he's a bad guy. It's like the devs knew no one would side with Caradoc over Arthur, so they just had to throw this guy into the mix to try to make you rethink helping Arthur right at the end. I think Caradoc only gets good characterization at the very end, where you can finally grill him on why he thinks Arthur should die. Basically, he says that the reason Avalon is so shitty is because they were never able to move past King Arthur, which is why they kept bringing him back from the dead anytime things got bad around there. You can ask him how Avalon is supposed to survive the weirdness and Red Death without Arthur, and he's like, don't know, don't care. If they can't live without him, they shouldn't live with him. It's like really nihilistic and kinda cruel, but also he's right. Orion's argument is basically, trust me bro, we'll get it right this time. The mistake that Merlin, the greatest druid ever made, was that he was stupid, and he didn't include Arthur's humanity in the resurrected version. Trust me bro, I'll do it right this time. Like, the most unconvincing argument ever, and the entire time Arthur doesn't chime in, which makes sense because just 20 minutes ago he was lamenting on how his life's work was a failure. If only the last, 5 minutes didn't completely destroy all this great last-minute characterization. The last character you meet before the ending is named Hob, and he's the part of King Arthur's soul that represents his humanity. You actually meet him in the beginning of the game too, you just have no idea that's who this is when you do meet him. Hob basically says, I don't care what you do with the rest of my soul, just leave me out of it. He says he's had enough of being endlessly brought back from the dead and to just let him rest. He actually echoes a lot of what Caradoc says. He's kind of like, I'm supposed to be long dead by now, why should I care what happens to my kingdom anymore? However, he offers you the alternate option of taking the rest of Arthur's soul for yourself and becoming the new king, saying that you've already become the human part of his soul. And then you finally reach the Tainted Grail and get to choose your ending. There's the 3 I mentioned above, and then one more where you can give Arthur's soul to someone else, which is a really weird and stupid option. I don't even know why that's there, to be honest. But the big 3. Alright, here's where things get stupid. Do you know how Arthur had completely given up on Avalon just 10 minutes ago? He saw that everything he had built fell to ruin, and everyone he had trusted to run things ran them into the ground. You remember when that happened? Well, if you choose to either destroy the soul or take it for yourself, Arthur says this:
You think any other human could wield this power? I endured 600 years of pain, of suffering, of loneliness. I made the sacrifices, me! And now you think you can take it from me? The hubris. No. I reject your claim. I will reforge Avalon. Perfect this time.
And you're forced to fight him. Forget the bond you two developed over the course of like the last 30 hours, forget all of the growth you and Arthur went through together. In this last moment, no matter what you said or done, you have to fight King Arthur. If you choose to either resurrect Arthur or take the soul for yourself, you have to fight Caradoc, with the latter option being one after another. This one makes more sense as Caradoc has been very clear from the beginning that if you're not going to help him kill Arthur, he'll kill you. It's the same with giving the soul to anyone else, you have to fight both. The people you can give it to are generally the story important NPCs you've met so far, but you can also give it to a beggar if you want, completely ruining everything for everyone. Anyway, besides the beggar ending, these endings are kinda cool because none of them are actually bad. The kinda stupid thing though is that none of them are bad because they're all so vague as to not let you know what happened after the ending, which is where the slideshows come in. Except like I said, the ending you chose has no effect on the slideshow. So let's say, for example, you choose to bring Arthur back, but you also chose to help the Horns of the South rebel, help Yvain keep Coronach, and order the Giants to help the Dalriada march on Camelot. What the fuck would happen then? Or what if you took the soul for yourself after killing Galahad and helping the Dalriada prepare for war? Like, would Camelot accept you as king? Anyway, there's actually a secret 5th ending that you have to do a bunch of kinda secret tombs to unlock. In retrospect, they're not actually that secret. I was just a smooth brain my first playthrough and never thought to circle back on the door with a picture of Excalibur on it when I actually had Excalibur. But anyway, each region has 2 to 3 of these secrets that only unlock once you have the artifact from that region. Each one has a tomb that gives you story information, mainly about Arthur's real backstory and how the Red Death is directly related to him. The rest being the tombs of Arthur's knights, where you can find spells that allow you to summon some of them, or just get their weapons and armors the rest of the time. You end up with 4 of them by the end: Galahad, the original one, not the one you meet in-game, Gawain, the Green Knight, and then Sir Vast, who's not actually a Knight of the Round Table, but you find him at the tomb of Arthur's blacksmith, so he's better than nothing. The cool thing about these summons is that unlike the weird spearmen or keeper summons, they're actually undead versions of the knights. In the case of Galahad, he actually is pretty pissed at you for trying to summon him. It turns out that by the end of the war, his knights had turned on Arthur, mainly due to how he won the war, which we find out through these tombs. Alright, so here is the condensed version of the true backstory of King Arthur. So the Four Dwellers are the natives of Avalon. They built all the massive strange structures we see by using the weirdness, which doesn't try to harm them because they're native inhabitants of it, unlike humans. Four Dwellers are naturally born from the Chaos Realm, but this bloke named the Weaver figured out how to weave together Four Dwellers from the weirdness, making especially strong and wise Four Dwellers. He was approached by the Pale Lady, a particularly old and powerful Four Dweller. They live forever, by the way. But the Pale Lady tricked the Weaver into inhabiting this strange realm in exchange for giving him more power to work with. The trick being he could only use that power to create one really strong Four Dweller, the Pale Lady's son. The Pale Lady had the power to see outside of Avalon, which no other dweller could, so her new son also had this power, and he saw the humans across the sea, and then he died. This giant Reddit post that I read after I wrote this section the first time and realized my recollection of the events didn't make any sense. But anyway, this post, written by Tyrannus here, says the other Four Dwellers killed him because of his interest in humans. The prince's soul then somehow merged with King Arthur across the sea. In the wake of her son's death, the Pale Lady became this giant bleeding heart, except the blood is actually tears, and also what's causing the Red Death outbreak. To get her son back, the Pale Lady sent Arthur's sister a vision of Avalon, and the king proceeded to lead his people across the sea, start a war with the Four Dwellers, and then almost lose that war. To win, Merlin performed some kind of Four Dweller ritual to allow them to make Arthur immortal. Caradoc was actually the result of a previous experiment with the ritual. Arthur still ended up dying though, but Merlin's ritual had allowed them to keep Arthur's soul trapped in that weird chamber we saw at the beginning, so that he could then be resurrected during the kingdom's time of need. I still don't really think my recap makes sense, but it turns out the Red Death only returns when Arthur is dead, because it's the Pale Lady crying over not being able to sense her son's soul. So the reason why things always got better when Arthur was around was because the Pale Lady wasn't sad that her son was dead. To get the true ending, you need to visit the Weaver 3 times, eventually culminating with a fight against him. He's pretty reasonably pissed that the soul he was forced to create by the Pale Lady ended up slaughtering his people, but you know, it happens. You also need to visit all of Arthur's knights' tombs, which has you become acquainted with the hot geography lady, who tells you that the only way humans will ever be safe on this continent is to imbue a small part of Four-Dweller soul into all of us, which would then make the weirdness treat them like natives rather than like invaders as it currently was. So the secret ending has you returning Arthur's soul to the Pale Lady, which also imbues a part of it into every human, theoretically ending the Red Death and the weirdness threat forever. Yay, best ending. The journey to get the secret ending is probably one of the best parts of the game. The whole Four-Dweller backstory is really fascinating to me, despite how I seem to have not really paid attention. If you do this ending, you still have to fight Caradoc because he's a little bitch, but you don't have to fight Arthur, which is interesting. Anyway, I think the lore of the world is very interesting and I'd love to see more, but the actual story of the game is pretty mid anytime you're not actively talking to King Arthur. Now the question is, do the visuals make up for the mid-story, bad combat, and uninteresting characters? I would say yes, if you can grab this game on sale, I definitely would. I had more jaw-dropping moments in this game because of the visuals than pretty much anything else I've ever played. I'm gonna be honest with you here, mid-stories and bad gameplay are kind of the norm for games inspired by H.R. Geiger. Like, I talked about the game Darkseid on the channel a while ago, which definitely fits the bill, and you probably remember Scorn, the walking simulator game with insane visuals but basically no story. I don't know, it's kind of a weird trend. I will say that Tainted Grail does have better gameplay than those two, but yeah, is Tainted Grail Skyrim but good? Not really, one, because like I said, Skyrim is already good, and two, because this game has almost all of the exact same problems as Skyrim did. Bad combat, an uninteresting story, flat and boring NPCs, but at least Skyrim did have that strangely freeing sense of I really can go anywhere and do anything. Tainted Grail doesn't even really try to have that same feeling. You can't go anywhere on the map because you can only unlock the last 2 regions once you reach that point in the story. You can kill a lot of NPCs and steal things from people's houses, but you'll probably get so much money from the main quests that you have to do to advance the game that you don't need to. I don't know, beyond the first layer of having similar gameplay, Tainted Grail kinda isn't that similar to Skyrim. It's definitely its own thing, for better and for worse. Thank you all so much for watching.